Today is March 28, 2006. I am Miha Smith. My story mentor is Jessica Barris. Sir, what is your name and where were you born?
My name is William Morris. I was born in Joliet, Illinois.
Where did you grow up?
In Joliet, Illinois.
What high school did you attend and what year did you graduate?
I attended a high school called Joliet Township High School, and I graduated in 1943.
Did you enlist or did you get drafted?
Well, as a matter of fact, all the seniors in the school were given a test, unbeknownst to us. And the results of the test were none of the boys knew what we were testing for, so it was kind of a surprise that it was a psychological test, I guess. And those that passed were invited to go up and take a physical, and then they were told that they were qualified to go into the Air Cadet program. And that's how I got into that.
What branch of military did you serve?
Air Force. It was in those days it was called the U.S. Army Air Corps.
How long was flight school?
I went in 1943, in June of 1943, I believe it was, and we graduated in April 15th, 1945. So that's almost 2 years.
Why was there no graduation ceremony for your flight classmates?
President Roosevelt passed away, and we were in a mourning period, so there was no graduation exercise.
Is there an event, memory, person, or thing that you want to share about the war service?
Well, yeah, there's a lot. Okay, well, we had our graduation ceremony, which wasn't a ceremony at all, just a graduation, in 1945, May of 1945, I believe it was, or April, I'm not sure now. And it was a non-event. And after that, we just kind of went into a pilot pool where we waited to go to fighter school, which we did. And then we finished that. And the last thing I remember, by this time the war was really going downhill. And President Truman elected to drop the bombs. And as a matter of fact, one of my very, very good friends, whose name is right up here, he was the co-pilot on the bomb that was dropped at Nagasaki. And his name was Fred O'Leary, and who has passed away since. But he visited us. We visited together a lot. And after that, I remember one of the things, my last remembrance about World War II was ferrying P-51s from San Antonio to Garden City, Kansas, where they were what we called pickled. They were just put in a field and eventually destroyed. And then I got out and went back to school. And I knew Jackie, obviously, at that time. She was my girlfriend. And I worked for a while, and life produced, small events here and there. My dad had a restaurant called the White Fence Farm in Lamont, Illinois, and Jackie and I proceeded to get married, which we did, and then we had three children, 2 boys and a girl, all of whom are successful in their own fields. My oldest son is a doctor professor at the Naval Postgraduate School. Mark is a plumber, and Elizabeth is a nurse who she works for UCSD. And I was sent out here on a mission to for the lab that I was working for, the Argonne Laboratory, and we liked it so well we decided maybe we should think about coming out here. Well, in the meantime, one of my friends had come out here, and so he made arrangements for us to interview, which we did. And by golly, we came out too. And we stayed here, and I went into the Air Force Reserve flew out of March Air Force Base for many years, and as time went on, I wanted to go back in. I was asked to come back in to fly fighters in 1950 something, 51 or 52, but I couldn't because my clearance was a Q clearance, and I told my boss, I said, I want to go back. He says, you can't. And I said, well, quit. He said, Bill, you can quit if you want to, but you can't leave the country. Because of the clearance I had, and we were doing work on uranium-235, and that precluded my leaving the country. So I didn't go back in for the Korean event. But when I got out here, and I flew with the reserve unit up at March Air Force Base until the Vietnam War started. And I thought to myself, by golly, I'm not going to miss that one. So I went back in full-time then, and we were flying, at that time, we were flying gunships, and they were new, as you probably know. And I was flying in the AC-119, and we flew that in Vietnam. Now, do you want to stop here? Or?
Where in Vietnam, and can you give us the dates?
Well, I went over in Vietnam in 1968, in the winter of 1968. And to get there, we had to fly up to Alaska because we couldn't make it with the legs that we had in our airplane. So we went to Alaska, and then we went all the way out to Adak Island, and then flew from Adak down to Midway. And there were some eventful things that happened there. We were up at Alaska at Elmendorf Air Force Base for almost a week and a half because the weather was so lousy. And we finally got cleared to go to Adak. And Adak is a small island way out at the end of the chain. And the weather was just unbelievably bad. And we landed there, and we RON, which means remain overnight. And while we were eating dinner, we got talking with some of the pilots that were flying out of there, and they were flying C-130s. Well, we had this old C-119, which was not what you'd call a speedster. And they mentioned to me, when you take off, make a hard left turn, because the mountain is right in front of you. Well, we took off, and there's no way I could make a turn because... There's no way I could make a turn because we just were barely keeping airborne because we were really loaded with fuel. And fortunately, I had my hand on the throttle quadrant because my co-pilot reached up and started to pull the throttles back. And I said, Joe, what in the world are you doing? He said, well, we're supposed to go to medial power, which is maximum except takeoff. I said, look underneath, look out the window. And the trees were going right underneath our empennage. So we got that done. And as we progressed down, my navigator said, we are just making terrible time. And he said, we got about 90 knot headwinds, which they didn't predict. So it was going to be dicey. Well, we got to what we call the ETP, equal time point. And he says, we got to turn around and go back. And I said, why? He says, because we'll never make it. I said, well, if it's equal time point, Bill, I said, would you rather go back and have the winds diminish and have to land in the water around Adak where you got about a 15-second lifespan, or continue on and at least we have to ditch this thing? We'll be down around Midway Island where the water's nice and warm. Of course, they've never had a successful ditching in this particular airplane, but, you know, we had that all figured out. Anyway, we proceeded on, and we made Midway, obviously, because I'm here, and we landed there, and I declared a crew rest, which made the headquarters pretty upset. But it was a long, eventful flight. And we stayed there on Midway for 24 hours, I think it was. And that was an enjoyable event. Then we went on from Midway, we went to Wake Island. And we got to Wake Island, and we had to have a new engine installed in the airplane. There, we sat there for about 2 weeks, waiting for the crews to bring an engine out and get it installed in the airplane. And so we were all having fun on Wake Island, going around looking at the artifacts in the ocean and the stones. And in fact, I got a stone right up there that a crew ahead of me made a saying of about them beating us to Vietnam. Anyway, when we were ready to take off from Wake Island, we got I happened to look out the window. Yeah, and yeah, this is the stone here. This is a stone. This was Colonel Nye, I think it was. Yeah, Colonel Nye. He made so many. And let's see, what's it? Wake Island, Colonel Nye and crew. And he says, "He who passes," somebody laughs last, as we beat you to Guam. Colonel Nye and Scotty and Pete. And it's called the Shaft Award. Anyway, those are the little tricks. We were ready to take off from Wake Island going into Guam, and I happened to look out our pitot tubes, which are your devices that you have on the airplane for measuring airspeed and altitude and so on and so forth. I looked out there, and the sun was shining so that I could see that there was a flag waving out there, and I said, "What the devil is that?" Well, it turned out that my crew chief forgot to remove the pitot covers. Fortunately, it was a nice sunny day, and everything. It wouldn't have been any problem. We could have burned him off. But he and I had a little chat. I had shut down the engines and made him get out and remove the pitot covers, and we had a little chat out there about what his duties were. And we had no problems after that. And then we proceeded on into Guam. And then from Guam, we went to the Philippines, Clark Air Force Base, and we RON'd there. And I bought a lot of things like that big eagle up there, and a couple other things that I sent to Jackie. A lot of monkey pod dishes and things like that. I don't think you can probably get that. Probably not a lot of life late there. Anyway, we went on into the air base and.
What were some of the jobs you had during Vietnam?
I'm sorry?
What were some of the jobs you had during Vietnam?
Our job at Vietnam was a gunship, and we supported the ground people at night, particularly at night. In fact, all the time I was there, which was a year and a little bit, we didn't fly in the daytime. I saw the daytime one time when we did a double header that we landed at another spot and rearmed and refueled and everything went out again, and it became daylight before we got back. And that's the only time I ever flew at daylight in Vietnam. So that was an interesting point. Vietnam is really a very, very pretty place. I guess if you aren't on the ground getting shot at. But I flew probably a little over 100 missions, and all at night, and they were very adventurous.
What was your highest rank in the Air Force?
A major. I retired as a major.
Would you like to share something about your family?
Oh, sure. We have a very close-knit family. We were together at every opportunity that we can get. And I remember Jimmy, my oldest boy, was in the reserve. And so he got to fly with me a couple times here in the States. And one of the very eventful flights we had was, I can't remember where we were going or why we were, but we were going into Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, and to one of the most hellacious storms I've ever flown in, and I've flown in a bunch of them. Going in there, and I thought to myself, my God, here I am taking my son into a situation we may never survive it. But we did, obviously. And he was pretty excited because he was sitting up there in the front in the cockpit, and he got to see some of the eventful weather we had to fly in from time to time. And I can remember one time we were going on a mission, and we were down getting weather, and our operations officer came down and said, "What are you doing down here?" "Well, we're going on this mission, so I'm collecting the weather." He says, "You don't need to know the weather." He says, "You're going to go anyway, so just get the hell out of here." So anyway, that's what life was like in the Air Force. Okay.
What are some of your community activities?
I'm sorry, honey.
What are some of your community activities?
I can't understand you.
Community activities.
Well, I was never much of a joiner, but by and by, my sister told me, she said, "Bill, you have to join the VFW." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because all of our relatives belong to the VFW. My dad, my uncles, they're all servicemen from the First World War, and they all belong to the..." And she said, "Not only that, but you're going to join it here in Joliet." I said, "I don't, it's okay." So I did, and as a result, we kind of started going over to the VFW here, 3788, and as time went by, we got to the point where I said, we should really transfer our membership to this VFW out here, which we did. And Jackie joined the auxiliary, and we went on, and pretty soon somebody asked me to take an office, and I said, "Well, I'm really pretty busy." I said, "I've got a lot of work to do with..." Then after I retired, I didn't have all that time I had a lot more time on my hands, so I said, "Okay, I'll help you out as much as I can." So they asked me to take the chaplain office, and the fellow who was a chaplain there was a little bit upset by that. But I went to the commander and I says, I said, "Arnie doesn't want to give up this job." He said, "I already told him that you were going to take this over and to help you out." So I went to Arnie and I said, "Arnie, I'll need you to help me out." I said, he wasn't too happy about it, but he said, "Okay, all right." So anyway, I took the chaplain's office over, and I spent 10 years as a chaplain and a service officer. And finally I said, I've been doing it now. I am the service officer, he's a chaplain, and that's where we are right now.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.